welcome to my channel. Now in this video you want to find the domain of this function 1 over the square root of x minus 4. Okay, so I call the function f of x. Good. Now in our previous video we've solved for the first question and the second function, so we've solved for the domain of those two functions, and most of the explanation we're done over there. That's why I selected the two of them to be of one kind. Okay, each of them of their own kind, right? So it will be very necessary to go back there and get all the explanations. Then I'm still going to do same right here. Good. Great. Now, we want to find the set of all real numbers that will make this function to be defined. That will be by either finding the set of numbers that will make the function to be undefined and taking them away and take the remaining, or we go straight to finding the set of numbers that will make the function to be defined. But anyway, all of them, all the two procedures still produce the same result. In fact, it will be just based on how convenient it will be based on the function. Great. Now, in this question here, in this function here, we have a numerator and we have a denominator. Now, a rational function is going to be undefined if the denominator is 0. So as long as the denominator is not 0, the result will be defined. It will be a finite real number. So what we'll be looking at here is that we'll be looking at square root of x minus 4, we will say should not be equal to 0. Good. Another thing here is that the square root of something, right, only gives us a positive or 0 output. So if you talk about square root of a function containing square roots, alright, so we talk about the square root functions, the output are only going to be non-negative real numbers. When I talk about non-negative real numbers, I mean real numbers that can either be 0 or bigger than 0. Great. So now this equation here, okay, I don't know whether I should say on equation or whatever, since it's not equal to. But what this tells us is that the square root of this should not be equal to 0, meaning that logically that the square root of this can be less than 0, or the square root of this can be bigger than 0, but it should not be 0 at the point, alright? Good. So we talk about numbers either less than 0 or numbers bigger than 0. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, that the square root of this kind of thing, alright? In fact, the square root, whenever we see a square root function, it cannot give us something less than 0. So the only thing that we are left with right here is that the square root of x minus 4 should be strictly bigger than 0. It cannot be equal to 0. This cannot be less than 0. So the only way now remaining is that this should be bigger than 0. Good. And then for this to be bigger than 0, well, that means that the input x minus 4 is bigger than 0. If a number is bigger than 0, the square root of that number can never be equal to 0. So let me give this to you, that the square root of a number a is equal to 0 if and only if, let me make it longer, the square root of a number a is equal to 0 if and only if a is 0. So the input of a square root or the radicand, if the radicand is not 0, then the result of the square root can never be 0. Good. So if the square root of this thing is bigger than 0, that means that thing is bigger than 0, meaning that x is bigger than 4. So with this last inequality, we're talking about all real numbers bigger than 4. So if you want to write out the domain will be of the form, the domain will be a set of all real numbers, that is a set of x where x belongs to R, such that alright, such that x is strictly bigger than 4. Alright? Now check this out. If x was to be equal to 4, we'll be having 4 here in place of x minus 4, which is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. And we're going to be having 1 divided by 0, which is undefined. But as long as this thing is bigger than 4, then all our values will be defined values. Good. Okay, great. That is for the third question. Alright, subscribe to my channel. Let's move over to the fourth question right away. So we're having square root of 9 minus x squared. This one is going to be quite fun. Alright, let's move over to the fourth question.